Welcome everybody to our fifth edition of Beyond Delhi, hosted by the Perth US Asia Centre in partnership with Austrade and their AIBX program. We are delighted to welcome you to this fifth instalment. So far we have gone to Tamil Nadu and talked about the next phase in higher education, Karnataka, where we talked about digital gaming and animation, Maharashtra, where we talked about super funds. And today the focus will be on the METS sector and the next phase in Australia-India partnership and we will be grounding today's discussion in the eastern states where the majority of the interest of this sector arises from. So specifically, it's included in West Bengal and the eastern states of India. Places like Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh, Bihar and Odisha are home to the majority of India's resource deposits and mining activity. This makes it a critical area for increased investment in support of long-term export and investment relationship with India. Indeed, Australia recently established a consulate in Kolkata, in the capital city of West Bengal, to further Australia's trade, commercial and investment interests, not just with India, but also with the neighbouring states of Bangladesh and Nepal. Australia's economic links with the eastern states are substantial and expanding, particularly in the METS sector. We see this most recently with the Australian government's $4.8 million commitment to improve Australian resources and mining equipment technology services understanding of South Asian markets. Excuse me. I'd like to mention here, as the Perth US Asia Centre, we're very proud of the recent delegation from Western Australia, the largest delegation to go to India with the Deputy Premier. And I'd like to acknowledge the West Australian Trade Commissioner, who is on the call at the moment, and her team, who led a successful delegation. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guests today. And initially, I'll be introducing them one by one. And first up, we have Denise Eaton. We'll be hearing 5 minutes each from each guest and then open up the conversation for discussion. Denise is the Trade Commissioner and Investment Commissioner for Kolkata and more broadly, the energy sector for Austrade. Denise has held a number of roles within Austrade, both in Australia and overseas, including assignments in Taipei and India. She brings with her 30 years of experience from around the globe. Prior to leading the Austrade's resource and energy team in South Asia, Denise led the health team in Australia for 15 years. And before that, worked in private sector roles in the US, UK, Germany, and France. She's also supported the establishment and growth of her family business, which provides structural engineering services in Australia. Denise, we'd invite you to open the discussion and explain a little bit about what the METS sector is in layman terms for those of us from the policy world, and also explain Australia's special interest in this sector in the context of our bilateral with India.
Thanks very much, Sonia, and good afternoon, everyone. As Sonia said, my name's Denise. I'm in Kolkata or Calcutta, which may be a more familiar city name for you, covering the resources and energy sector. I have a small team located throughout India, but most of them are on the eastern side of India. I'll focus on resources today, and just to put that in context, the Australia-India relationship trade relationship focuses on 3 key areas. That is METS, or mining equipment, technology and services, the supply of critical minerals for new energy and advanced manufacturing solutions, and the supply of bulk minerals such as coal, copper and manganese. METS, or as I said, mining equipment, technology and services, encompasses quite a wide range of items, including major and niche equipment, geomining consultancy, mining IT and software, circular economy methods, mineral processing, safety training, environmental solutions. So when we look at the end user of METS, that is the Indian mining industry, it is predominantly located in eastern India, and as Sonia said, states like Chhattisgarh, Odisha, Jharkhand and West Bengal, where I'm located. These states contribute to roughly 65% of India's mineral production. Austrade has been working with other parties and other stakeholders, such as other federal and state agencies, and it's lovely to know that Nasheed from Western Australia is on the line here, and also with industry associations like Osmine and Chris and her team. We've been working to raise the profile of Australian METS in India for 20 years, and now what we see is that Australian METS is the preferred supplier in India. Particularly in areas, and I would say, niche mining equipment, efficiency, IT solutions, and really the areas of mining safety and training. With equipment, I'd say our key competitors, there's quite a lot of them. They come from Canada, Japan, Poland, US, Germany. In the areas of safety and training, really we have a smaller competitive environment. We would compete against the Germans and the US, I'd say predominantly. But again, the Australian METS capability is really seen as the provider of choice in India. At this moment in time, Austrade and our partners are working with roughly 40 active Australian METS companies in India, and more than half of those are located in the eastern states of India. The larger companies will have a branch. Most of the SMEs will have an agent or partner located in eastern India. Just very quickly, a trend we are seeing is that METS companies are starting to look at manufacturing in India. That's partly driven by the Modi government's requirement to have or build the manufacturing capability in India, but also Australian companies realising that they're, of course, lower cost to manufacturing here and access to great skills. And we all know that accessing skills and resources in Australia is and most countries around the world is very difficult, but the skills are here. And companies, I think, are becoming to realise that it's not just India that they're looking at. India, a lot of the mining companies I've been talking to have operations in Africa. Most Indians have strong connections in the Middle East. And so METS companies are looking at using India as a base to inform their global strategy. I know I've only got 5 minutes and I could probably talk for a lot longer, but I want you to hear from all of the other really important people on this call and really valuable knowledge that's here today. But wanted to finish up by letting you know that for Austrade, we are working again with our partners, and our premier event that we'll be focusing on to support METS is IMME in November in 2022 this year. And we will have a large contingent of Australian companies coming out and bringing the right buyers to the Australian stand. And we've also published a METS directory, which we will be updating and using as a nice little bit of collateral to hand out. What I want to finish up by saying is that now the relationship between India and Australia is stronger than ever with the signing of ECTA, the Economic Cooperation Trade Agreement, which has benefits for the METS sector. Tariffs and duties coming into India aren't incredibly high, but every reduction in duties helps. And it's also, the relationship is also supported obviously by the strategic relationship and alliance in the Quad. So on that, I would like to finish up and do welcome anyone to reach out to Austrade, and of course everyone here. Please, if you don't know about the opportunities in India, pick up the phone, send an email, have a chat. We can talk in more detail. Thanks, Sonia.
Thanks, Denise. Really interesting to hear about how there is the appetite for Australian METS in India, and I'm quite keen to hear from our next speaker and connect that back to the broader development, economic and mining development implications for Indian communities and the social and political significance of the METS sector, not just in India, but also in its neighbouring states. To comment on this, we have the Executive Director of Asian Confluence, Sabyasachi Datta. Sabyasachi is the co-founder and Executive Director of Asian Confluence, which is a think tank and headquartered in the northeast of India. The Asian Confluence is a regional initiative to promote an open space for intellectual and cultural dialogues within the Indo-Pacific region towards creating a better understanding of the northeastern regions of India and the eastern south regions neighbouring countries, especially in the context of India's evolving geopolitics in the Indo-Pacific. Sabyasachi pioneered the third space philosophy of Asian confluence through a host of programs to enhance civil society and people-to-people contact between India and her neighbours, and also encourage a better understanding of the cultural and social political issues of the region that are the driving force behind Indian policies like the Act East policy. Sabyasachi, I look forward to hearing from you about not just your region, but why METS is more than just about efficiency and productivity, but connects up to wider development issues in the East and especially in the Northeast.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sonia, for having me on board, and it's great to be here. I'll just use a minute to lay a background of the geography, because you're calling it Beyond Delhi. So we are talking about the eastern quadrant of India, if you can say, so east and northeast. If India was to have 7 immediate neighbors, we have 5 of them in the eastern eastern and northeastern part of India. The eastern part is also linked to the Bay of Bengal. It has 5 international neighbors, namely Bhutan, Myanmar, India, Bangladesh, Nepal, and China. So from many points of view, this entire region is at the epicenter of many activities, especially in terms of regional development, regional growth, regional cooperation, especially in the sub-Himalayan region and the Bay of Bengal region. And Australia-India partnership is at an all-time high now. India, Australia are partners in the Quad. So from many points of view, there is, I think, immense opportunity for India and Australia to work together in a sector such as mining and METS, because it involves it involves large amounts of people, their livelihoods. A bit about the landscape of this entire region. This region we are talking about, the eastern northeast part of India, is not only geostrategically important, as I just highlighted, but there are very unique issues here. For example, the land use is a big issue. Who owns the land? The ownership of the land. The relationship. The region is very rich in water resources, interlaced by many rivers. So how do the mining activities intertwine with the water resource management of the rivers of the region? The region is very rich in biodiversity. How does that sector interlace with the mining? And it's very rich in different types of people, many tribes, many indigenous communities, many types of customs, many different types of people, and people live here. So this is a very complex mesh of mining with land use, with local customs, and I think many of these issues make the mining sector very politically charged when decisions are to be made, and I think this is something that needs to be kept in mind. Having said that, mining education, I think capacity building, skilling of people, how do you make the METS mining growth inclusive to the local livelihoods of people? How does it become more acceptable to the local aspirations? These are issues that I think need to be addressed when we're talking about really forging ahead to the next level of METS cooperation, say between India and Australia in the region. If you see, often the narrative has been that sometimes, for example, in the Northeast, mining has been done rather unscientifically. It has created a lot of repercussions, both politically as well as to the environment. And the requirement for scientific mining methods, smart mining technologies, smart collaborations, safety systems. So the whole gamut of services would be needed. The last angle I would like to bring in is, I think there is immense opportunity for creating new supply chains within the region, such as because of the so many borders with neighbors such as Bangladesh. There's a lot of connectivity initiatives underway as part of the region becoming more tied to the Bay of Bengal and Indo-Pacific region. And geopolitically, it's a very important region. So an industry such as METS would be very good if approached in the right way to create more prosperity and industry and livelihood and trade between the countries in the region. So I'll leave it at that for now, and then you can ask me more things later.
Thank you, Sabyasachi. There's some really interesting threads that I look forward to picking up later on in the discussion. But for now, I'd like to turn now to Siddharth and ask his reflections on the power of scientific mining in India's development story. But also, Siddharth, you're in a unique position, having worked in Australia and India, to tell us how the mining sector has changed over the last decade, and what is it that the Australia doesn't understand about what's happening in India, or what is needed to unlock these METS complementarities to the next level. I'll give a brief introduction to Siddharth. Siddharth is the Senior Vice President Operations of Triveni Earth Movers. Triveni Earth Movers is India's largest contract mining company operating in India and overseas. They have several projects in coal, metallurgical mines, and also large projects in Indonesia. They're seeking overseas opportunities as well. Triveni is a user of Australian METS and has purchased Misabi radiators from L&M Radiators based in WA. Sid has also worked for several years for Rio Tinto Group in India and overseas before joining Triveni. Sid, I welcome you to respond what's been said so far and tell us what is it that we are missing about India's mining sector and how it's changed over the last 10 years.
Good afternoon, Sonia, and thank you very much for having me on this session. Look, as a context, I worked for about 25 years with Rio Tinto, both in India and overseas, in Australia, in the UK, and in Canada. And I have seen India's mining jurisdiction change over a period of time. Although India's regulatory framework to mining is very similar to Australia and to some extent to Canada because it follows the common law, the allocation of ore bodies is fairly different. And one can debate it whether it's the right way to do the development of ore bodies. However, India has its own ways and uniqueness. But the good thing in all of this is a very strong consumer demand. And that's only growing. And, over the last few years, I have seen things changing in bulks in particular, where the development of those ore bodies are being a lot more commercialized than it was in the past. So what you would notice is a strong impetus in growth, and allocation continues to happen. And therefore, with those allocations, the development of the ore bodies happen. That gives a business opportunity. We in Triveni have been contract miners, but now we are also investors, largely in bulks, but we've also got projects in other commodities, including base. Where we see opportunities from METS in Australia is largely driven by our, kind of focal initiative of maintaining and developing our own equipment. And we do that innovatively, and therefore we reach out to equipment suppliers, innovators in Australia who work with us and have been doing so over some 5 or 6 years now and have built that relationship. But that's us. For industry across the country, similar opportunities would come largely in the services sector. So, you would use as commercial or private hands develop these ore bodies, the reach out or outreach to mining consultants is going to grow and has grown enormously. For suppliers of such services, the challenge is how do you break into this country? And it's no different from any other jurisdiction, in my view. You've got to be out there building your relationships, and you've got to have an outlook for the next 3 to 5 years. You're not going to get that opportunity overnight. people as clients need to be comfortable with that supplier, because a mine has a mine life of 30, 40 years. One builds up that relationship over a period of time, and that trust builds in. So as an example, I have, or rather Triveni might have 2 or 3 international mining consultants we work with, and we are very comfortable with them, and we have built up that relationship and trust. And the reason we would have reached out to them is we acknowledge their presence in this country. We acknowledge their understanding of the geology and the issues the ore bodies throws up in this country, more familiar with than some others. Similarly, we work with METS. We work with equipment suppliers in Australia, and they understand our requirements, and therefore they build in their cost estimates to those requirements. And in doing so, one expects, you need to build in that commercial reality that you're not going to make money on day one with an Indian client. You're just not going to do it. You got to be out there, and you're taking a hit for a year or so, and you build it up. Now, the good thing that's happening in this country is I may not be convinced that the allocation of the ore body is the right process to do it, because Western jurisdictions follow the first come, first serve principle. This country doesn't. But it's in the hands of very large listed corporates, and they have deep pockets, and they're learning, and they're learning very quickly. So they appreciate what the importance of good quality goods and good quality suppliers of services. What it does need is in building that relationship over time. We are not very big. We are not even listed. We are privately held, but we have taken a determined stand that over the last 15 years of us in doing our mining, we need to move to the next level. So we identified Curtin. It took us a year to do that, and we have an engagement with them where over the next 5 years we'll be sending our people across for training. It's not to say that Indian universities don't have that expertise. Of course they do. But what you do need is a broadening of that horizon that Indian universities would not be able to provide, purely because Indian universities are more tuned to Indian conditions. But you take that next leap, and I'm pleased to share with you the first batch goes in November. Similarly, that's from India. The next batch goes in January from Indonesia. So it's not limited to this country. Kind of expanded ourselves. So that in a nutshell, I guess, is my narrative view, and I'll be hoping to take in more focused questions as we move along.
Thank you, Siddharth. It's always valuable in these discussions to bring together policy, industry, and government, and we really will benefit from those perspectives. And I'm keen to pick up on some of those ideas that have been a common thread throughout our Beyond Delhi series around the importance of relationships, commercial realities for Australian entrants into the Indian market. To finish up, I'm pleased to invite Chris Gibbs-Stewart. She is the CEO of AusMine, which is the peak industry body representing the METS sector. Chris became CEO in 2014 and has been working to help METS companies succeed and grow since 2007. With 30 years of experience in international business, industry development, and general management, her background covers a wide range of industries. She's held senior management positions in Australia and overseas. Chris, I welcome you to reflect on Sid's comments and your own work in the bilateral focused on METS.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you very much, and great to be here. What the other speakers have already said is very interesting and very relevant in the context of what we're talking about. And Sid, it's great that you're buying Australian METS. So thank you for your support of our sector. AusMine, just as a bit of background, is an industry association, and we represent the Australian mining equipment and technology and services sector. And we've been around doing that for about 30 years. And really, our purpose is to advance innovation and technology in mining around the globe, and to support our members to be more successful in what they're doing. And we do that through connecting them to people, connecting them to insights, and connecting them to different opportunities. We have about 650 members here in Australia. And that ranges from startups, so pre-revenue companies, all the way up to some of Australia's largest firms and everyone in between. Now, we've had a long-standing relationship with India. We actually took our first mission to India in 1993. So that was quite a while ago. And one of our first major international projects was a demonstration mine using some Australian equipment to look at how the equipment and services would work in situ. So again, we've had a long-standing relationship. It's gone a little bit up and down over the years, but certainly with the recent developments between the Australian and Indian government, we are very focused on India. And Denise mentioned there's about 40 METS companies operating in India. And that really tells me that we have a lot of opportunity there. There is much more that we could be doing and a much greater presence that Australian METS could have in India. And with everything that's changing and with the applications of technology and innovation, Australian METS really sit in the sweet spot. First, mining is facing a lot of different challenges, and we are under pressure to change how we operate. That pressure comes both internally, the resources are getting more scarce, the grade is declining, we have to dig deeper, and we need to mine more efficiently so that we can make money. And despite where the commodity prices are, mining efficiently and optimizing what we're doing is a very important part of running a successful mining operation. And then, as Sabayachi also commented on, we have the external pressures. We have the pressures from the public, expectations from the community, the environmental pressures, use of water, waste, the list goes on. And of course, with the climate change issues, there's a lot of issues around decarbonization and ensuring that we do our part to ensure our planet is healthy and viable. And all these challenges are layered with the digital disruption that we're facing in our everyday lives in the industry and the businesses we operate. And so the Australian METS sector really provides a lot of the new technologies, the new solutions that mining companies are looking for and deploying more. So that's everything from automation, that's digital, that's your artificial intelligence, your digital twins, real-time sensors and monitoring, autonomous drills, autonomous trucks, and really the list goes on. And it's not about, reducing the amount of people who work in mining, but it's really changing the focus from a very human-intensive industry to one that's more technology-focused. And really, if you look at the development of technology in mining, and particularly over the last 10 years, and particularly in Australia, you're looking at really 10 years ago not having very much autonomous vehicles deployed to now having the largest fleet of autonomous vehicles in the world deployed in the Pilbara. In 2015, we adopted handheld instrumentation and mobile devices on site, which is used to collect and process and analyze data. And that kind of really revolutionized what we did on the mine site, because you didn't need all this big equipment to bring in there to monitor what you're doing. You could simply do it on your PDA or your mobile phone. And that's really driven a lot of the technology development around it. And then during COVID, and even though COVID was a difficult time, and we like to say that when times get tough, the tough get innovating, there was a tremendous amount of innovation that happened, particularly around health, safety, and things like people management and monitoring. And now there's a real focus on electric vehicles, battery charging stations, maintaining the vehicles and all the new equipment needed around the ESG space. So a lot has been happening, and it's not only the application of the technology itself, but it's how we do things. So there's a tremendous amount of collaboration, open innovation going on right now, and the realization that we need to work together in order to overcome the challenges and, more importantly, provide the opportunities that the mining industry brings. And so I'll just briefly touch on, in that kind of open innovation space, that we are soon to launch in India our Global Mining Challenge program, where we're working with a number of Indian mining companies to look at some of their key operational and strategic challenges and bringing those out to market to get input and solutions from the Australian METS sector and some third countries too. So that's a new way of looking at how to do things, and people are really realizing that not only do we need to work together between the miners and the suppliers, but the miners also need to work together because they face many common problems. So with that, I will stop there.
Great, thank you, Chris. That's a great jumping off point for opening up the discussion. And I invite our participants, if you have any questions for our panelists, please drop them in the chat, as we'll now open up for questions from the audience. And feel free to direct your questions at particular panelists or just open for anyone to comment on. I might start with asking Siddharth a little bit about how the sector has received the Australia-India trade agreement, the interim agreement, which we've seen there's been reductions in tariffs on exports, Australian exports to India, but is there anything of note in the ECTA agreement for the METS sector? And as an industry representative, what will you be looking for or asking for from both governments as they negotiate the broader trade agreement?
Look, Sonia, I must admit, look, I'm not a trade specialist, nor do I maintain much of an interest on the trade agreements the two countries or have come to an arrangement with. So I really am not qualified to answer that. But in terms of how do you deep dive into the METS and the technology bit that Australia is enabled to provide? I mean, I think the point Chris made that she's initiating the issue that a miner faces in a sort of a way is there isn't a platform to know what we may be missing in terms of technology innovation happening out there. You know, because we don't know what we don't know, and you know, exhibitions do give you that forum. But what we are limited to do is to visit the country and visit enterprises there and to see what's on offer. But you know, in terms of and people are hungry out there because that drives productivity, it drives costs down, it improves production, and therefore the revenue stream. So I'd be very interested to hear or to find out what Chris has in mind in terms of an initiative she mentioned. But back to your question, sorry, I'm not the right guy on trade agreements.
Maybe I'll put it differently. What more is there a role for government in breaking down or addressing some of the challenges in market entry or this increased collaboration, or is this something that industry and the innovators will do on their own? Is it a case of government getting out of the way?
No, I mean, look, what the governments have done is awesome because that brings in the impetus. Then it's up to enterprise themselves to make out what the market is out there, in my view, to see. Lowering of imposts and tariffs is always welcome. It's always welcome. One of the things, I mean, India's geology is very similar. We all know that, pretty similar to South Africa and Australia. What India doesn't have at the moment is in terms of discovering deposits or unraveling deposits that are there in terms of base metals and in terms of you know, the commodities that are needed in a world of electric vehicles and the changes that are happening there. Now that's up to this country to attract that investment, and that's a change in the mineral jurisdiction, which is yet to happen. Now, one hopes with the demand for these commodities, things will change here. India is largely underexplored. That's the point.
And that's really interesting. Christine, just to give us a sense of the sector and where the opportunities are, from exploration to extractive to rehabilitation, where in a mine life cycle is Australian METS uniquely placed, or to help? Is it, as Siddharth says, in the exploration side of things, or what is Australia's METS advantage compared to other or natural place in the Indian mining life cycle?
Well, it's really all the way through, from initial exploration all the way through to closure and remediation. But one thing we see with India is that it's changing a lot in terms of how mining is being approached. And we at AusMine have what we call a Mining Maturity Innovation Index. And we see India going from what we call a tier 3, evolving, to a tier 2, which is transforming. And that means India is becoming more sophisticated in its operations. There's more investment in mining operations from international firms. The value chain is developing. There is a growing interest in innovation, and that is really a signal from the work that we've been doing in India already, because Indian miners have come to us. Indian miners have come to Australia and looked at the programs that we're doing, and they want to work with us in a similar manner. So we know that that innovation is a growing interest. And there is a developing METS sector. So based on that, there are a lot of technologies that Australian firms are leading the world on, that Indian miners will need, and particularly at an operational level, because as we know, some of India's miners are some of the biggest miner in the world, say like Coal India, for instance. And Australia is very good at mining coal. Australia is very good at mining coal, open pit or underground, from a safety point of view, from a communications point of view, from a logistical point of view, from an environmental management point of view. And so all the technologies that we're using in Australia, we could certainly, bring to India to help coal mining companies, mine more efficiently and mine in a safer and more environmentally responsible way. So, I really think, as I said before, 40 companies is very small. There should be 400 companies working in India, and really the opportunities are immense. And I think, just going back to your first question, the partnership between India and Australia and the renewed relationship has really brought to life the importance of the entire economic and bilateral relationship between our two countries. And it's really shown a light on what's happening in India. And again, the opportunities there, not only in mining, not only in METS, but across many, many different commodities. And so from that, there'll be a lot more Australian METS companies and other industries looking at India.
It's really interesting what you were saying about coal mining. Coal doesn't have a very good reputation, coal mining, at the moment. And when you were talking about scientific mining and the safety and rehabilitation and environmental impacts of METS sector on coal mining, it made me think of a conversation I was having with Sabyasachi in preparation for today's talk about a time in Meghalaya where coal mining operations have been shut down. Sabyasachi, would you like to share with us a little bit about your reflections and maybe how what Christine's just been saying could have avoided or be a part of the solution? You're just on mute.
With respect to coal and what Christine just said, we are headquartered in a state called Meghalaya in the northeast, and it's just adjacent to Bangladesh. And for the longest time, the entire economy of the state, or the 70% of the economy, if I can say, was driven by coal, open pit coal mining, and export to Bangladesh, neighboring, but the mining was unscientific. And largely driven by also lack of the ability of the state governments to intervene, because there are some unique laws there where the land is owned by the community. I'm just raising this as an issue because there are regions in India where these are a complex web of factors which will affect an industry like mining. And with the result that what happened is that the mining was unscientific. There was things like rat hole mining, and a lot of human rights issues came up, environmental damage, damage to water bodies, and it had to be stopped, and which has led to a very big issue now of actually reclaiming and the land and the health of the ecology there. So again, I think there is opportunity for METS to in that sector of closing up dangerous mines, things like that. I think that said, if a more scientific approach were to be taken, this is the need of the hour. I think, and Australia-India collaborations in that would be very welcome, in line with the whole host of technologies that Chris just talked about. Does that answer your question?
Yes, no, it's always good to have a case study of an example where the MET sector has a role to play in avoiding environmental or even economic crises from developing. And the situation we talked about in Meghalaya was a good example. It strikes me, Denise, that we've talked a lot about Australia and India being partners in the MET sector, but actually we're also competitors. For example, in coal or iron ore, and even in some emerging critical minerals. How do we balance that tension in being competitors in the mining industry as well as partners?
I'd say competition is a good thing, and industry, the commercial sector, it grows with competition. If you had a monopoly in iron ore, for instance, there is the potential that monopoly could become quite lazy and rely on the monies that are coming in from that. But when you have competition, that drives efficiencies, that drives innovation, and that's, as Chris was saying, what we're seeing now. So all I can say is competition's a good thing, and I'd actually be keen to hear what Sid thinks about that, because as he said, they're doing a lot of contract mining as well.
Sid, please.
Look, absolutely agree with you, Denise. Competition is what drives innovation. You're absolutely right there, bang on. And you look at the past of the mining sector, admittedly, you look at the last 20, 30 years, mining, it's only in the last few years that the mining sector has actually been innovating. Otherwise, commodity prices put us all in a very merry mood, actually. So you're absolutely right. I cannot disagree with that. Completely agree, actually.
I might stick with you. We have a question from Nasheed in the audience, the Trade Commissioner to WA, from WA to India. And she says, there are considerable skill shortages in the mining sector. From an industry perspective, how would you address this challenge to the Australia-India relationship? The example you talked about earlier with Curtin University is one. But are you seeing a flow of workers between India and Australia in the mining industry? Because right now here in WA, there's a mining skill shortage, and is that a ready flow that you see in your work?
In terms of people moving across country, no, I'm not familiar with that. I do see the importance of training, whether it's through executive programs that we have with Curtin and we have with the individual consultants out of Australia who come and advise us on need basis. But per se, I wouldn't say that we are losing people to other countries. I mean, that is something I haven't noticed.
Christine, global mining challenges, is skills shortage or training a part of your work?
Well, I was just going to add to that question that there isn't yet, or I don't see yet, maybe Denise has a different opinion because she wanted to add something too, that flow of people, but there could be. And I think we have a lot of opportunity to work together to look at that people-to-people exchange and look at what skills that we need. And we know, for instance, that India has a lot of skills in IT and computer science and data analytics. And I think there's a real opportunity to exchange people, exchange knowledge, and think about what we're doing and from a bilateral relationship level in that digital transformation of the mining industry. And I do think there's a lot of opportunity for people-to-people exchange.
And thanks. If I could just add to that as well, obviously with ECTA, there is a mutual recognition of skills. So there is now more scope for engineers to travel back and forward between the two countries. So there is a pathway now to facilitate that. And if I could also add, yesterday I went out and met an Australian client with an office here in New Delhi. They were struggling to get their resources in Australia, the skilled people in Australia. They were employing engineers who were sitting at a desk providing consultancy back into Australia. So, you know, and that could be a two-way thing as well. So it's already starting to happen, that mutual recognition and understanding and the movement of the skills, whether it be virtual or physical.
Agree.
I might now turn to a question from Timothy Strickland, and Sabyasachi kind of alluded to this with his mention of supply chains. Timothy asks, how important are growing concerns about the security and integrity of supply chains to future Australia-India cooperation in the mining sector? I might also try to tie in an earlier question from Casey Bowie, who asked about the external geostrategic context of the mining sector with reference to the Quad and AUKUS and the increased demand for Australia-India supply chain cooperation with other like-minded partners like Japan. How do these geostrategic issues around supply chains, chip shortages, clean energy affect the sector, or how should we be thinking about how that might evolve over the next few years?
Well, I think Quad, for example, is a great. There is Australia, India, US, and Japan working together for an Indo-Pacific vision. There's the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, which is there now, and I think there is a huge opportunity for inventing new lines of supply chains and recalibrating existing ones, and in that context, within the Quad, whether it is or bilaterally between India, Australia, or trilaterally, for example, Japan is doing a lot of infrastructure projects in the region, trilaterally or within the Quad, in whatever way. I think the slate is open, and there's a lot of opportunities to work together for, as I said, increasing regional prosperity, international trade between the countries of the Indo-Pacific, of the Bay of Bengal region, which is the eastern part of India, where we are talking about, is bang on in that geography. So it's very relevant. I think to the METS sector can have an immense contribution in that regard. I would say it's one of the sectors in which there could be could have a lot of contribution, primarily because not only because it could involve a large number of people, and what's needed is also to be very inclusive in the growth, and that's where I think the METS sector would be very, very, very important.
I'm going to come back to that inclusivity point you make, but before I do, one more question from the audience, from Kat Kang. She would like to know who the competitors are in the METS ecosystems, both in India and Australia. Who, other than Australia, are the big METS providers? Who is India currently buying from, and who are the competitors on the world stage in places like South Africa, Indonesia, Canada? Christine or Siddharth, you might be best placed to answer this one.
Well, I guess from an Australian perspective, and maybe Sid could answer the other one, we see our competitors as probably Canadians. Obviously, there's a lot of big OEMs and equipment manufacturers in places like the US and in Germany and other European countries. And then, of course, there's growing competition from places like China. But where there's competition, there's also collaboration. So we also work most closely with the Canadians. We also work very closely with the Americans. So I think while we have competitors, Denise said before that it's very healthy to have competitors because it drives both of you to be better. And it just lifts up the whole industry in terms of the standard and the quality and what we're doing.
And just adding on to what Chris mentioned, heavy equipment comes from a lot of parts of the world, including the US and Germany in particular. Consulting firms are across the world, whether it's Canada or Southern Africa, wherever there's good, or the US and Australia. And equipment, yes, also does come from China to India. In terms of technology and innovation, we in Triveni have more recently signed up on an application which is quite a big order given to an entity out of Russia, and this is pre-COVID times. But that entity was owned by the owner of Nokia. So there was that. I think it was Finnish, but it's a pretty switched on technology, and it met the flexibility that one requires. So, like in any other industry, I would think people are grappling with what's available where at commercial terms and applicable.
I will note that one of our audience members, Chadha, has pointed out that the Australia-India Economic Cooperation Agreement hasn't extensively covered the METS sector as a service of focus, and questions around will this be a part of the broader agreement, which is in discussion? And we'll keep that on notice unless anybody has comments on that. The broader economic agreement is being negotiated at the moment. And so including the MET sector as a part of the other services sector in the services chapter, I guess, will be a priority for the Australian MET sector. But I'd like to finish up by reflecting on some of the earlier points that Sabyasachi made. I was remiss of me not to do an acknowledgement of country at the beginning of this session. I'm here on the land of the Whadjuk people in Western Australia. And here in WA, there has been a fraught relationship which has sometimes resulted in many financial benefits for traditional owners, but also a lot of heartache around the destruction of sacred sites. I know that there are technology services that are used by large mining companies here to protect or avoid trespassing on sacred sites. Is METS collaboration or in acknowledging traditional owners and their rights to land, does the METS sector have a role to play in helping India navigate its own complexities in the mining sector in places like the Northeast?
Is that for me?
Yeah, I'm interested to hear from you and yourself, Chris, as well. And even Sid from his experience working here in Australia and the Northeast.
Yeah, I think there's enormous possibilities, especially in terms of mining IT technologies, mapping technologies on land use, land rights, mapping of various resources, which would help the local governance and the local administrations and the mining companies. And sometimes it's not even companies, it's sometimes even local communities who have to be included in the entire process. So I think it would really go a long way to empower, and that's where I highlighted the role of upskilling and skilling at various levels would be very important, and the critical role of METS in that.
Yep, I think there is a lot of partnering and training that METS sector companies could do with local companies to look at the whole benefit to the wider community from a mining operation. So I think that's that side of it. And then there's the specific services that our METS sector has when you're dealing with local communities, when you're looking at social impact, not only the services, but the technologies as well. So there's a lot of new IT applications which look at things like community engagement, which look at community sentiment, which help people better connect with the local community to understand what's going on and also to communicate. Because part of that relationship with the community is about good communication and making sure people are getting information in a timely and accurate and easily accessible way. So METS sector companies have been working with traditional owners and Indigenous landowners, traditional custodians for a long time, and we could be part of the mix certainly in India.
Look, I mean, there is absolutely no doubt there is much to learn. The issue, I think, you would have in India is how receptive is India on soft issues. That's how do you get India to be open to learning on what most Indian commercials will think that we have the expertise. But there is a lot. I'll give you an example. 10 years back, I had an oversight on a Rio Tinto project in India. And I made it a point that the community manager on that project has to be someone with great expertise. He was actually a New Zealander who worked for 25 years at PIPA. We brought him across to work and live in the tribal lands where this project was. He did a terrific job, absolutely terrific, in managing and engaging and managing expectations of people, which really embedded the substance of that particular project and enabled it to move to the next step.
Great. That's a great example to finish up our conversation today. Thank you, everyone, for being a part of it. And I might just hand over to Denise to make any final comments and reach out to those on the call that are interested in talking further.
Thanks, Sonia, and thank you to all our wonderful speakers who have been here today. I hope everyone, the audience, has found this informative and has really whet your appetite to explore India further. As Sonia has said, there are a lot of resources out there to help you. Please do reach out to Austrade, reach out to Osmide. Sonia, I'm assuming our contact details will be available?
Yeah, so Austrade and the Perth US Asia Centre will make this video available on their website, so that will be the place to go if you would like to return to this conversation or share it within your companies or with interested parties.
Thanks, Sonia. And as I said, the relationship now between India and Australia is strong. The world is very volatile, and what we need is friends, and we need to be working together to address some of the issues that are facing the globe at this point in time. So let's all work together to enhance the relationship between India and Australia and make it even stronger. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you, Chris, Sabyasachi, and Siddharth. It's been a really enlightening conversation. We've gone deep into METS, touched on the industry, connections to broader geostrategic issues and the importance of this sector to local communities in economic development and the environment. So thank you all for joining us today in this final installation of Beyond Delhi. And thank you to my team at the Perth US Asia Centre and to the AIBX for bringing us together.
Thank you.
Thank you.